You know that draft season is in full swing when everybody comes down to Mobile, Alabama to watch the Senior Bowl. Typically, the Senior Bowl is reserved for, seniors, but starting this season, anybody who's draft eligible can attend, and that means we saw some fantastic football players take the field in front of NFL coaches, GMs, and scouts. Some guys showed out, some guys didn't. Some guys' draft stocks actually dropped, and that's why today I'm going to be talking about the biggest winners and losers from day one of the Senior Bowl. This video will be split between the national and American teams, so I will be putting timestamps if you just want to see one of them rather than both. And just remember, just because somebody is a loser today doesn't mean they can't be a winner in the next practice, or just because somebody is a winner today doesn't mean they can't be a loser in the next practice. These are just my observations of some of the top guys and some of the guys that definitely need improvement. We're going to start with the national team, and the first winner I want to talk about is edge rusher out of Marshall, Mike Green. He was probably the player I was most excited about entering today because, man, his film, it is electric. He is one of the more explosive players in this draft, and quite honestly, one of the more explosive players I've seen at the edge position these last couple of years. He led the nation in sacks, albeit it was at Marshall at a smaller school, but production is production. However, being from a smaller school was a concern for some people, and even more so, at Marshall, he was listed at 6'1, 236 pounds. Not exactly an NFL size for an edge rusher. However, he was a winner before he even got on the field for practice because when he weighed in, his measurables came out to 6'3, 251 pounds. Still on the lighter side for a defensive lineman, but plenty fine to play at the NFL level, especially with his explosiveness and his speed. And the best part about that is he looked completely natural at that weight. At times, you'll see people come to the combine or like this, the Senior Bowl, come in with 15, 20 more pounds, but it's clear that's not their playing weight. It's clear they're slower than they normally would be. But that wasn't the case with Mike Green. He looked just as fluid, he looked just as quick, and he dominated in the one-on-one drills between offensive linemen and defensive linemen. He had a couple really good wins, including a counter move inside. He had one where he just straight up bent around the edge straight to the quarterback. The only person who really stopped him was Ariante Ursery, the tackle out of Minnesota, who, spoiler alert, we're going to get to shortly. But overall, he had a fantastic day. I fully expect this guy to be gone within the top 20 picks. I really do think, seeing that his size is not as much as a concern, he's going to start flying up draft boards. And that's why he's probably the biggest winner from today. The next winner we're going to talk about from the national team was Oregon offensive tackle Josh Conerly. Conerly has been talked about in draft circles very highly. Some people even have him as the top tackle in this draft. Not me, that's just what a lot of people have him as. However, he performed like one today. Outside of one rep against Michigan's Josiah Stewart, where he got him with an inside move, Conerly was near flawless, especially in pass protection in both the one-on-one and the team drills. We saw the stuff we've become accustomed to with him. Extremely athletic, quick feet, agile enough to get out the outside, has the anchor to anchor down and stop a power rush if he needs to. He performed well in the run blocking drills, wasn't anything spectacular, but again, a true technician as a pass protector. I had some concerns about Conerly's size and his length, but those concerns were alleviated. The measurables come out to about 6'4", 300 pounds with 34-inch arms. Not huge, kind of barely hitting the thresholds you need to be at to play offensive tackle at the next level. However, those are playable, absolutely. Now, I do personally still see a world where he's a better guard than he is a tackle. However, I'm fully on board him being a tackle. This is clearly a great player, a true technician. He had a great day. Next is GrayZ, an offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. Now, I know I said Conerly probably had the best day. I take that back. In my opinion, Zabel had the best day of not only any offensive lineman, he had the best day of any player at the Senior Bowl day one. So if you don't know about Zabel, he played left tackle at North Dakota State, and while he has the size and the height, unfortunately, he measured out with 32-inch arms, and that just isn't going to fly at tackle at the next level. So, Zabel decided to work as an interior lineman today, all across it, left guard, center, right guard, and he was amazing. During the one-on-ones, he dominated every player in front of him. He didn't lose a single rep, and he looked good at all three spots, specifically at center. And this is a very weak center class. It is not a crazy thing to say that he is the best center in this draft class. And he hasn't even he played along the entire offensive line at North Dakota State, but again, he was primarily an offensive tackle. Either way, he proved he's a day one starter across anywhere on the interior offensive line. That's a big day for the kid from North Dakota State. Our next winner is a guy I am slowly but surely starting to fall in love with. Anthony Belton, offensive tackle out of NC State. This guy's a monster. He stands at a hulking 6'5, 345 pounds, and he pairs that size and length with a lot of athleticism. But don't get me wrong, the measurables weren't the only reason he was a winner today. He dominated, again, the national team offensive linemen, there were a lot of them dominating the defensive linemen across from them. And he was one of them. His quick feet and anchor were on display as he didn't lose a single rep. In fact, edge rusher out of Arkansas, Landon Jackson, when he went against him, he got put on the ground. His anchor was so strong, his hands were so strong, he put him on the ground. Now, don't get me wrong, he is ridiculously raw. That is what the film tells you. But these are the traits that get players picked highly. 36-inch arms, athleticism, and showing out at the Senior Bowl. I think there's a chance that Belton ends up being a really high draft pick, and for good reason. I'm starting to fall in love with him as a prospect. The next winner and only pass catcher on the national team list is Miami tight end Elijah Arroyo. Aroyo had a silly day, man. He was uncoverable in the one-on-one drills. He is just such a nuanced route runner for a guy his size, fully aware of how to use leverage to get open, fully aware of how to utilize a defender's blind spot to get open, and on top of that, he's got the athleticism to break away. Very fluid mover. He had a great rep on a slot fade, used his hands to subtly get some distance between him and the defender, and did a great job tracking the ball over his shoulder for what would have been a touchdown. He won all but one of his one-on-one reps, and he put the NFL on notice. He said, I'm one of the better pass-catching tight ends in one of the best tight end classes we've seen in recent memory. The next player is Donovan Raku. He is a edge rusher out of Boston College, and he is one of my draft crushes. I think Raku is going to be phenomenal at the next level, and he proved that today. There were concerns about his arm length, but he comes in and measures in at 34-inch arms at 6'2", 250. Freakishly long athlete. And on top of the measurables coming out in his favor, he had a fantastic day on one-on-ones, only getting stopped by somebody we've kind of already mentioned and alluded to being on this list, Ariante Ursery. But that was it, and he showed off his variety of pass rush moves that he's known for at Boston College. His best win of the day came against Wyatt Mazum, just immediately two-hand swipe at the start, beat the tackle immediately for the sack. It was a beautiful thing to watch. I think he's one of the most refined, if not the most refined edge rusher in this draft class, and I think he did a good job proving that today, pulling out a variety, again, of pass rush moves. If he continues to put together a great week, he is somebody I can see sneaking in at the end of the first round. I think he's that quality of player. And the last winner we're going to talk about is, again, somebody I have alluded to already, Ariante Ursery, offensive tackle out of Minnesota. And while I do think Zabel had the best day of any offensive lineman, if you said Ursery, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not going to argue against that. He had a fantastic day overall. He is a massive tackle with an immense amount of strength that showed up during the team drills, during run. He was pushing people around. He also had some great wins in the one-on-one drills between the offensive linemen and defensive linemen. He had a win against Mike Green, who was on this list, and against Donovan Raku, who's also on this list. He showed patient hands, quickness out of his stance, and again, as I've mentioned, that anchor that teams are going to fall in love with. Now, I do personally think there is a world where he is a better guard than he is a tackle, but either way, he put on a show. He improved his draft stock. Now we're going to get to our losers, and the first loser I want to talk about is Zack Thomas, cornerback out of Florida State. Thomas is getting a ton of pre-draft hype. Daniel Jeremiah had him going, I believe, as a top 15 pick. And while I'm not quite that high on Thomas, I completely agree. This is a first-round corner, and as such, I expected him to come into the Senior Bowl much like Quinyon Mitchell did last year and dominate, and that's just not what happened. Now, Thomas didn't have an awful day by any means. He had his good reps, but didn't look quite as explosive as he did on film. He struggled. He was stiff in the hips, and that led to him getting beat down the field and getting beat on routes. Tez Johnson straight up tripped him on an out route. So while again it wasn't awful, he did have his reps. I came away relatively unimpressed, and I do wonder if he's dealing with some sort of nagging injury because he just wasn't moving as I'm used to seeing him move on tape. The next big loser, probably the biggest loser of the day, Landon Jackson, the edge rusher out of Arkansas. I'm going to keep this one super simple. He had 3 reps in the one-on-one drills between offensive linemen, and on all 3 reps, he was on the ground. He had a really bad day, didn't impress in team drills. This is going to drop his stock quite a bit, and I already wasn't that high on him. The next loser I have listed might surprise a lot of people. It's Fannon Jr., the tight end out of Bowling Green. Had a crazy, crazy receiving season this year. And I've watched the tape. I like Fannon. I fully expected him to come out here and dominate, and that's just not what happened. Much like Thomas, he just didn't look as fast, didn't look as fluid as he does on tape, and on his one target that was thrown to him today, he dropped it. Just wasn't a super impressive showing by somebody, again, I had very high expectations for. I'm not out on Fannon. I trust the tape. I still think he's a fantastic receiving threat, but you got to be able to separate yourself because this is, again, one of the best tight end classes we have seen in recent memory. And if you're going to put up a stinker at the Senior Bowl, that draft stock is going to fall, and there are plenty of other tight ends to go above you. And the last loser I'll talk about on the national team is offensive tackle out of West Virginia, Wyatt Mazum. Many people were concerned, including myself, about Mazum's length and his ability to play tackle at the next level. He measured in with 32-inch arms. Yeah, that's not happening. But he still tried to play tackle at times during the one-on-one drills, and he just got dominated every single time. Like I said, Raku destroyed him on his best rep of the day. He struggled heavily with speed around the outside and then struggled with power because people were able to get their hands on him before he could get his on them. Now, he did have reps in guard where he looked significantly better. He had a fine day, so he's not some crazy big loser. He's still going to get drafted, probably relatively high as an interior lineman, but playing tackle to the next level, it's out. Nobody's drafting him to play tackle anymore, and that is a loss of money, and that's probably what he wanted to play. Now we move to today's winners from the American team, starting with the person who stood out the most, in my opinion, defensive tackle Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. In case you're not aware, this defensive line class is absolutely loaded. Go look at Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 players. Half of them are probably defensive linemen. Now, there is a clear top defensive tackle prospect, that being Michigan's Mason Graham. But after that, the pecking order gets sort of muddy. But a name that keeps coming up for me is Walter Nolan. And he proved that today. He is slowly but surely proving, hey, I'm the guy right after Mason Graham. I'm one of the top players in this class. He measured in at about 6'3", 300 pounds, and he is just so absurdly explosive. That's the word I'll use for him. You can watch anybody else that went today. I'm not sure anybody had the get off. Okay, there's one more in the American team who might have. We'll get to him soon. But Nolan's get off at his size is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, he just looks like he's getting shot out of a cannon every time he comes out of his stance. He had a really quick win against fellow standout, who we'll get to shortly, Clay Webb, where he converted speed to power, launching off the ball directly into his chest, pushed right past him to the quarterback. He was dominant against the run in team drills. He just had a fantastic day. He was the best player out there for the American team. Very excited to see what he does in the coming days. The next winner we're going to talk about is the only wide receiver on the list of winners, which is kind of surprising. Typically on the first day, the receivers are dominating, but not this time. But this guy was Felton, wide receiver out of Maryland. I mean, he was by far the best wide receiver between both teams. It wasn't even close, by a comfortable margin. It's so clear he's such a natural separator. He's so naturally gifted at creating space. The quick feet and fluid route running that comes with that led to him absolutely dominating in the one-on-one drills. He also had the best catch of the day, where he beat his defender on a go route very cleanly, but the ball came out late. It was underthrown. He had to adjust, come back to the ball, and caught the ball through contact, keeping his feet in bounds in the back of the end zone. I mean, every time he appeared on screen, it just felt like he was winning. He was dominant. The young receiver had a great day. Another standout for the American team for me was Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU and son of NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. He measured in a hair off of 6'5". He's 250 pounds, really strong frame, and you saw that today. Not only in the team periods where he did a good job run blocking, but in his route running, he knew how to use his size and his physicality to get open. Very clearly a natural athlete, good footwork, technically sound route runner. He also did a good job showing off his hands as he caught a sick one-handed grab with his left hand on a high throw from Jalen Milroe. I was already a pretty big Mason Taylor fan coming into this draft. This Senior Bowl performance bumps him up a little higher on my list. Our next winner is Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle out of Tennessee. This was the other guy I was talking about, might have had the best get off all day. I mean, the guy was just a definition of a disruptor. Multiple times during the team period, he was just in the opposing backfield as the ball was snapped. His get off is completely absurd. He also had a couple wins in the lineman one-on-ones on his get off alone. He was just too quick for a lot of these guards to handle, which is good because he measured in at like 6'1", 295 pounds on the smaller side for a defensive lineman, but if you're going to perform like this and have a get off like that, I think you're going to be just fine. It was a great performance from him. Next, we have our first of two DBs on the American team, talking about Trey Amos, cornerback out of Ole Miss. And he wasn't like consistently amazing all day, but he stood out because he was just clearly the fastest player out there other than maybe Tez Johnson. And the play that shows this is he was guarding one-on-one with Jack Beck out of TCU, who also had a pretty good day but didn't make either list. And Beck ends up running across her and beating him initially. However, you see Amos and that closing speed come right behind him, and he's there for the incompletion. Now, albeit it was a high ball, but there's a chance that ball gets picked off if it's accurate. It was a fantastic feat of speed to watch. He showed some excellent footwork. He's always been a physical corner on tape. He also showed that today. And Amos has always been kind of a fringe first round guy for me. If he can continue to put together performances like this, take it to the combine and show off that speed, I think him being a first rounder could very much become a reality. But the other corner who had a great day, and in my opinion, a better day, Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky. He was the biggest surprise of the day for me. He had by far the best day of any defensive back. Sticky is the way I would describe him. He was constantly in receivers' hip pockets, constantly being physical with them at the line of scrimmage. Nobody was able to get anything on him all day. He had pass breakups against Ty Felton, who was a standout on this list, and Jack Beck, who I said almost made this list as a receiver. The footwork was excellent. Again, he was physical, but not. He was disciplined at the same time. There were no penalties. He wasn't holding. He did a great job being disciplined. Showed plenty of speed. He was a lockdown player on the boundary, on top of being a willing run defender as well, even though he's kind of smaller for a corner. Really big fan of Upton Stout. He's been put on my radar. I can't wait to watch a little more film of him. And the last winner we're going to talk about is Clay Webb, interior offensive lineman out of Jacksonville State. Outside of one bad loss, and it was a bad loss to Walter Nolan, I thought he was near perfect today. And the play that highlighted his day was in the final period where it's one-on-one for everybody. They'll call up a receiver and a DB, they'll call up a running back and a linebacker, and then they'll call up an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman. And he got placed against Dion Walker. And if you don't know who Dion Walker is, he's 6'7", 340-pound freak athlete out of Kentucky, albeit very raw. But, I mean, this is a guard out of Jacksonville State. He should easily destroy this guy. He has 40 pounds on him and 4 inches. And what does Webb do in front of the entire team? He anchors down against a guy who's 40 pounds heavier than him and stops his pass rush and wins the rep. Very impressive. But outside of that rep, he showed patient hands and great technique in the one-on-one drills and was moving people around in the run game when it came to the team period. Just really had a fantastic day. And when you're a smaller school guy, you've got to earn your merit. And I would say shutting down multiple SEC defensive linemen earns you your merit. Now we're going to get to the biggest losers. And the first one to me is a guy I just mentioned, Dion Walker, the freak of nature out of Kentucky. As usual with Walker, he had a handful of splash plays, specifically in the run game, pushing guys back into the quarterback, this, and that. You see those flashy plays, but consistently you just come away so unimpressed watching him because he is so raw. We're talking about he was just maybe the worst player of the day, other than maybe Landon Jackson when it came to those pass rush drills. He stands with his pads straight up immediately. He runs right into the guy. He doesn't utilize his length. He doesn't utilize his speed. He doesn't use any pass rush moves. He just runs into you and expects you to work. And it didn't work today. And if you watch this film, this doesn't surprise you. This is what you see the entire time. He is the definition of a work in progress player that needs a ton of development. But you'd think you'd still show way more flashes than you did when you're 6'7", 340, and maybe the best athlete in the draft. Just didn't happen that way. He needs a ton of coaching. The next loser I'm going to talk about from the American team is Emory Jones, tackle out of LSU. Now, Emory Jones is an interesting story because after last season, it was consensus that him and Will Campbell were going to be two first-round offensive tackles. And then Emory Jones regressed to the point where he's more of a fringe day two guy right now. And as you'd imagine, he's coming to the Senior Bowl hoping to improve that stock, maybe not back to where it once was, but improve it so he is a for sure day two guy. And that's just not what happened. It was really one of the more unimpressive days for any offensive lineman. At tackle, he was getting worked around the outside. He was getting worked with the power rush. There's a rep where Shamar Stewart literally just pushes him 10 yards into the backfield and it's a sack. He got reps at guard and got put on the ground numerous times. Just a truly bad day and, overall bad year for Emory Jones, who could have been a first round pick if things had gone right. And the last loser I'll talk about today, as much as it pains me to do so, because I do still love him as a prospect, Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama. Now, I don't typically put much stock into the first day, even 2 days, when it comes to quarterbacks and throwing the ball. But Milroe really did struggle today where it mattered most. We all know he's talented when it comes to the physical traits, but accuracy is what he struggled with this season, and accuracy is what he struggled with today. Even on his completions, he was struggling with ball placement, and apparently, this was reported, he had 8 consecutive incompletions during the one-on-one drills, which you got to at least complete one of those. That's a sign of bad accuracy, and you hate to see it with whose biggest concern is accuracy. Now, I will say about Milroe, his arm looked significantly better than any other quarterback there, which we fully expect. And I really do hope he puts together some better accuracy days as days come along, but not a good showing for somebody who we're already very worried about from a throwing perspective. And that is all the winners and losers I have from the first day of the Senior Bowl. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like. Please feel free to subscribe. I'm really starting to post more consistently on this YouTube channel, especially when it comes in regards to draft stuff. So if you want to hear my draft takes or like what I have to say, please feel free to subscribe and keep up with those. As a reminder, you can find me on my socials, Dino Talk Sports on TikTok, Dean Trombino on X. That's where I can communicate with you guys. I love posting cut-ups of draft prospects I'm watching there. But either way, if you choose to follow, choose to like, choose to subscribe, or not, thank you all so much for watching this video, and make sure to tune in for day two's winners and losers tomorrow.